What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and for this episode today, I'm pretty much just going to be touching on two of the guys who are kind of polarizing figures in the sport right now and definitely got into the headlines and stirred up a little bit of controversy just surrounding their whole portal situations right now. And with those two guys being PJ Haggerty, who is hitting the portal out of Memphis this past season, as well as Chad Baker-Mazara, who was arguably the most shocking transfer in this offseason cycle. A lot of people, including myself, did not have any expectations of Chad Baker-Mazara entering the portal, just considering the year he had at Auburn and how both Bruce Pearl and Baker-Mazara himself have flirted and teased him returning for, well, I mean, I don't even know if it is his grad. I don't even know if you can really call it a grad year, just considering most people assume that you say grad year, it's a fifth-year senior, but he's probably on his sixth or seventh year of college basketball at this point. But again, I'm going to touch on that a little bit. Both guys, of course. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or any other content you see on this channel, please engage with it in any way you can. Whether it's liking the video, subscribing to our channel. We like to see what you guys have to say in the comment section below too, so definitely do that if you have any thoughts on any of our videos. And just tell other people about it. It really does help. We are going to be one of the only channels on YouTube that is going to be covering college basketball year round. Even in the summer where there are no games playing, we'll be covering portal acquisitions by programs across the country and talking a lot about our preseason overviews going to next year. So let's not waste any more time. I think I'd like to start with PJ Haggerty. He entered the portal last Thursday in really what was a chaotic day in the world of college basketball in terms of the transfer portal. On that day, actually, Chad Baker-Mazara did enter the portal that day as well. There was also a lot going on with Dane Danger. Initially, the news broke that he was entering the portal, but then his mom came out and said that no, that's not true. They like it in Memphis. He's sticking it out there. I think Dane Danger also came out and said something along those lines too. But the reality is PJ Haggerty is hitting the portal. And I believe he is being represented by his dad rather than an agency. So he is keeping it in family. And I know the original number, which I've heard circulating across people who cover the sport, was that PJ Haggerty and his dad were asking for $5 million. Now, that is a lot of money, would probably put him at the top of the country in terms of what guys are making NIL-wise. Do I think he's going to get $5 million? Definitely not. I actually do think that the Haggerty family has come down, lowered their expectations a little bit to around $4 million. I just think that it kind of came down to what the Haggerty saw other point guards in this offseason portal cycle get. You saw Robert Wright get people say it's $3.5 million, but I think Jeff Goodman came out and said that's actually closer to $3 million that Rob Wright is going to be making at BYU this upcoming year. And I really just think that outside of BYU and Kentucky, teams don't probably go past the $10 million threshold in their NIL budget. I just don't think that anyone outside of BYU and Kentucky this year had that type of an NIL budget to be able to go and land a guy like PJ Haggerty, especially this late into the portal cycle where he entered really late. And I do think that could have been somewhat of a leverage move by the Haggertys, where you look at what Coleman Hawkins did this past offseason, where he tested the draft process, obviously decided to withdraw his name from the draft last year, and hit the portal. Well, he already declared that he was going to be entering the portal before, at the same time as when he declared for the draft. But yeah, he obviously went through the draft process last summer, decided to pull his name out of the draft, come back to college for another year. And at that point, teams were kind of left scrambling. He was by far the biggest name in the portal at the time when he did officially undeclare for the draft. And that kind of forced teams to, hey, listen, we might as well take a gamble on a guy. It's late. There's not as many good players left to recruit out of the portal. So he got probably around $2-3 million from Kansas State this past offseason. Of course, that didn't really end up working out, but I'm sure PJ Haggerty is looking at that and seeing, hey, if Rob Wright can make $3.5 million or $3 million, if that's what it was close to, and Donovan Dent at UCLA, which he just transferred to, is probably making 3.1, 3.2, somewhere in that range. Then I was just a second-team All-American and averaged with third leading scorer in the country, averaged over 20 points per game, around 4 assists. And I definitely deserve to be making more, or if not as much as those guys. And I definitely do think he has a valid argument there in terms of, you look at last season alone, PJ Haggerty was better than Robert Wright. That's just the bottom line. He was. He brings a lot more positional size, really, really good at getting to the line, a much better scorer than Rob Wright is. And that's no slight to Rob Wright. Rob Wright's a great player, and I think he's going to be great at BYU on this upcoming season. But if we're being honest, it's just the reality. PJ Haggerty was the second-team All-American under the Associated Press, his recognition. And like I mentioned, third leading scorer in the country, can do a little bit in passing the ball. But I think another thing that is kind of stirring up a lot of talking points surrounding his name is just how the demands in terms of him wanting to play point guard. I think the quote from his dad was that he would like to see PJ Haggerty on ball, meaning playing the point around 70% of the time he is on the floor. Now, of course, that probably makes sense in a way in terms of just PJ Haggerty continuing to develop and become, try to put himself on the trajectory to be a pro and make it to the NBA, which I definitely think he has a chance to, just considering, like I mentioned, great positional size, is an absolute bucket getter, really can get to his spots when he wants. And again, he's able to draw fouls at an elite pace, gets to the line a lot, shoot a lot of free throws, which is things that NBA teams value a lot. But I do definitely worry a little bit. I think a lot of programs around the country are also worried about how, yeah, he played really, really well and put up big numbers in the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, this past year. But he really hasn't seen a lot of tournament success at neither Tulane, where he was before Memphis, and at Memphis this past year. And if we're being honest, I mean, I would understand those concerns a little bit. You have a guy who kind of hasn't proven himself in big games necessarily. Had a great Maui Invitational, I will say that. And, Memphis was a little disappointing in the tournament, for being quite frank. I just thought they had a really solid squad put together by Penny Hardaway. But in the normal Penny Hardaway fashion, you saw the collapse which happened against Colorado State in the NCAA tournament this past season. But kind of getting back to the point of Rob Wright's dad, not my mistake, not Rob Wright, PJ Haggerty's dad coming out and saying that, they're demanding that PJ Haggerty does play mainly point guard this next year. I think that's wrong. I think it's kind of getting to a point where, and this kind of even goes for the Chad Baker-Mazara situation too, which I'll definitely talk about, where it's starting to get to a point where the players are getting a little bit too much power, where it is really kind of starting to become a professional sports league in the world of college basketball, where you have guys holding out in terms of NIL value. I mean, you saw what happened with the Tennessee quarterback. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, where he held out, and obviously the Tennessee just decided, it's not worth the hassle of having to deal with all that. And I think a lot of schools also don't want to have to deal with that types of situations. But I think to demand that much power of not only how much you're going to be making in money, NIL wise next year, but also just how the team is going to be constructed in terms of their play style and scheming, where you want to be on ball. Okay, that's a fair thing to ask, but you also, you're not the coach. You can't just demand that you're going to be playing point guard and you're going to be playing all, X amount of minutes. It's just not right. I definitely don't. It's something I don't want to see, continue to spread across the sport, with guys in the portal demanding not only large numbers in NIL, but also demanding how coaches run their team, how they run plays, how they handle minutes for different players on their squads. And it's something that is definitely concerning me, just in terms of the direction which the sport is kind of continuing to move towards. And like, me and Josh, we recorded a podcast this last week where we talked a lot about what is wrong with college basketball right now. And this is something that just kind of falls under the umbrella of, it's starting to get out of hand, that they need more regulation on the players. I'm all for the players being able to make money with everything that they do for their universities and the NCAA, how much money they bring in viewership wise. They deserve to make money, but there needs to be more regulation with how this portal and NIL processes go. And I definitely think demanding minutes, demanding a team to play a certain type of way or have different lineups, I think that shouldn't even be this shouldn't even be a talking point that I'm doing right. I mean, that's ridiculous, I honestly think. And going back to the money thing, I just honestly don't know with him. I actually think holding out this long to enter the portal really hurt his chances of being able to make what he feels he is deserving to make. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he probably is kind of worth around that $3-4 million mark. But I just don't know this late in the portal, where guys already went out and spent a lot of money on point guards in a year where getting point guards was a huge priority for so many programs. I mean, right here at UConn, where I go, it was a huge hole that they needed to fill. And they were able to land Silas Demery Jr., more than likely be the starting point guard next year. A lot of other teams are in the same situation, like BYU. They needed to go out and get a lead guard. That's what they saw in Rob Wright, decided, hey, we're going to probably overpay for this guy. But, there's not too many great names, elite stars, point guards, I should say, in the portal this cycle. And we got to get them. We got to probably pay them the money to guarantee that we get them playing here next year. And at this point, there's probably going to be desperate teams out there, maybe a coach that is kind of on the hot seat and really has no options to turn to and says, hey, listen, we're probably overpaying for PJ Haggerty, but at this point, my job is probably on the line. We need to have a winning season this year. Let's take a chance on him, throw him the money he wants, and let him cook, let him play the point, let him do what he wants. But again, I wouldn't like that if that's kind of what we start to see more of year in and year out in college basketball. And again, I just don't know how many teams are willing to kind of have to go through the hassle of negotiating an NIL deal with PJ Haggerty, and of course dealing with his demands of how the team is ran on the court. But I think that pretty much takes care of everything I have in terms of my thoughts and reactions to the whole PJ Haggerty situation. It is definitely alarming to see players start to kind of do this. Just demanding or asking prices for NIL is one thing, but I mean, Ryan Hammer had a great quote about it. Again, somewhere along the lines of, hey, players shouldn't be able to tell a coach how to run their team. And it's, if that's something that starts to happen, I think that's terrible for the sport. Now let's talk about Chad Baker-Mazara. It was definitely, like I mentioned, probably the most shocking portal entered in terms of just players entering the portal. It was probably the most shocking one, I think, just considering that he's been such an important part of that Auburn program the last 2 years. Huge contributor to the team that just made a Final Four appearance. And Bruce Pearl likes the guy a lot. I mean, he had a quote where he talked about, hey, listen, I know Chad Baker-Mazara is a psycho, but he's a guy who wants to win at all costs, doesn't want to let his teammates down, was always trying to get better, and it's someone who I trust. And I think that's, really telling of Chad Baker-Mazara's character. Yeah, he's kind of he does do some things which may be detrimental to a program, like when he got ejected against Yale in the NCAA tournament 2 years back, or this past season with whatever went down on that Auburn team playing. I don't know how involved Chad was in that altercation, but again, he's definitely a guy that is somewhat polarized in sport for another reason being how old he is. He's 25 years old right now. In January of next season, he will turn 26. And if we're being quite frank, no one that old should be allowed to play college basketball. I do believe he was granted years of extra waivers of eligibility just because of one, COVID. I'm sure that was one of the reasons why. And then two, he has that JUCO, the NCAA ruled that JUCO years do not count towards your high major D1 NCAA eligibility. So he has that extra year, I believe, because he played the year of JUCO. But again, it's a guy who's probably going to be in a big bidding war, just considering he is 25, 26 years old. Whether you agree or disagree that he should be allowed to play college basketball, that's a guy who is, again, really mature, physically older than a lot of the guys across the sport, and has Final Four experience. He's went on deep tournament runs with Auburn. And that's a guy who I think a lot of programs are going to try to go after. I'll talk a little bit about some of the early mentionings of teams that are kind of looking to take a swing on him this offseason. But to kind of get back to the whole situation of why he entered the portal out of Auburn, I do believe in February. This is going off of what Jeff Goodman and Rob Dostler talked about on one of their podcast episodes. They came out and said that Chad Baker-Mazara signed a deal in February where he was probably going to be making close to around 1 million, 1.1, 1.2 million in NIL this upcoming season to return to Auburn. Now, I believe he did officially sign that deal for the season. Now, what Jeff Goodman talked a little bit about was how I think Chad was really, really hurt about Auburn going out and signing Keyshawn Hall for almost double what Chad Baker-Mazara would have made this upcoming year at Auburn if he were to stay there. And I think that he took a little bit of offense to that, considering that he was a part of this Auburn program for the last 2 years. It was a huge part of this Final Four team that they had this past year, and was a third team All SEC selection member. Analytics show he is a top 5 isolation scorer in the country, which I'm telling you, I did not know that just based off watching him off the eye test. And he is actually a really solid shooter from outside, shoots around 38-40% for three. That's a guy who is proven in the SEC. And again, huge part of the Auburn program the last 2 years, whether you like him or not. And I think he took offense to that, him and his camp of the agency who are representing him. And they said, I think they wanted Auburn to try to come up and get close to that number that Keyshawn Hall is going to be getting in terms of how much he'll make next season. And I just don't think that Auburn could get up that high. And Chad said, all right, I'm going to enter the portal then. Now, I think what the deal is he did sign that deal. I mean, he did sign that letter of intent to return to Auburn for next year. That is a legal document that he did sign. And I think this reality situation is he's probably going to have to pay back some of that money. I think the number Jeff Goodman threw out there was 60% of it. So, could be in the realm of $500,000 that he needs to pay back to Auburn for signing that deal. I mean, essentially it's a buyout where he's going to have to probably pay, 500, 600 grand since he signed a legal contract and is pulling out of it, which you're really not supposed to do. And I mean, again, this guy who's 25, 26 years old should probably know better at this point in his life about how that type of stuff works. So, again, it's kind of crazy. I'm really against. I really hope we don't start to see I really hope we don't see this more going forward where guys sign letters of intent or sign NIL deals and then decide to pull out after they already signed it. It's just going to create so much more chaos and just how much that is already going on and transpiring in the sport right now. I really, again, I hope we don't continue to move in this direction where it's already gotten out of hand. And it's only getting more out of hand. So I just hope things hopefully start to calm down a little bit more. But again, he's a really good player. He brings maturity. He brings experience. He's older, I should say. He brings a lot of experience making the Final Four, third team All SEC, and he's probably going to be demanding a pretty large number, just considering that he's probably one of the biggest, if not one of the biggest names in the portal right now. Just with a lot of guys already choosing where they're going to be playing next year, a lot of guys already committed who are in the portals. This is according to Jeff Goodman. These are the schools who have contacted him, at least. It's all very introductory right now. Nothing serious has transpired or gone on in terms of real looks for visits or commitments out of Chad. But the schools that Jeff Goodman listed were Arkansas, Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Providence. Now, I actually think that this is a really solid list for Chad Baker-Mazara to consider as is right now. I think the one that I would probably take off is Kentucky, just because I feel like Kentucky has so many guys. They just got Denzel Aberdeen, who he's probably going to be on ball a lot if he's able to crack the starting lineup. That's another kind of conversation to be had about Denzel Aberdeen choosing to transfer to Kentucky over a guaranteed starting role with Florida, probably if he stays in Gainesville with the Gators. But again, that's a story for another day. But yeah, I just think Kentucky is kind of a deal where there's too many cooks in the kitchen, I feel. And I just really don't know if that's the best place for Chad, if he really does want to try to prove himself to be a pro and make it to the next level. I really do like the Arkansas fit. I think that's a team that's really young, just of course with Calipari always bringing in the highly talented freshman, 5 stars and everything. That's a team that would be great to have a veteran leader, veteran presence, guy who has a lot of experience in the scene, everything you possibly could have in a college basketball career at this point. And I think he's going to bring defense, which he is one of the better point of attack defenders in the country. And again, I think he brings a lot of experience and leadership, will bring a lot of energy to Arkansas in a program that probably needs it, just considering how many, just the youth that program is probably always going to have with Cal as their head coach. I do think Ole Miss could be an interesting spot for him. I definitely feel Chris Beard does pretty well with personalities like Chad Baker-Mazara, guys who are kind of, I don't necessarily know if I want to say villainous, but maybe guys who have a little bit of turmoil or a little bit polarizing. He already brought in AJ Storr, so that's one guy. Chad Baker-Mazara would make 2 going for this Ole Miss Rebels program going into next year. So that would be interesting to see how that works. That would keep him in the SEC. Arkansas would too, but Ole Miss, I definitely think would be an interesting landing spot for him. I don't know if that's necessarily the best fit, but I definitely think that it probably would end up working. I think Ole Miss would probably have a solid season next year, regardless if they land him or not. Providence is really, really interesting. I initially never even thought of them as someone who could emerge as a suitor for Chad Baker-Mazara, but the more I think about it, he really does fit Providence. I think Kim English really does like lengthy wings. What he had with Ticket Gaines last year and some of the other guys on that team, like Gary Duval. Honestly, Ticket Gaines is, I feel like, really, really similar to Chad Baker-Mazara. I think Ticket's a little bit more of a strictly shooter. Chad can do a little bit more off the dribble. I think he's a little bit better of a defender as well. But I definitely think he kind of fits into that type of system and what Providence likes to run. The thing is, if he's looking to compete to get back to a Final Four, maybe win a national championship, I don't know if that's a spot to go to. I know Providence is bringing in Jameer Jones, who is a 5-star, their first 5-star since Chris Dunn. So that was a huge get for them in terms of their incoming freshman class. But again, outside of him, and I haven't really kept up with some of the signees that Providence has got in the portal this offseason. But I think Chad Baker-Mazara would probably fit in the system there. It's kind of going to come down to Chad probably taking a risk where if he wants to win, then, hey, maybe I can come in and be the guy on this Providence squad next year. I have a really talented freshman teammate coming in Jameer Jones. Maybe we can make a little bit of noise in the Big East, make the tournament go on a little bit of a run. And I think that would actually be really cool to see. I definitely think Chad fits in the Big East, just a little bit of a slighter frame, but think he plays a lot more physical than what the eye test tells you. Again, great defender. I think he's a guy that Big East fan bases will definitely grow to hate, especially people here at UConn and I'm sure Georgetown and the likes of Marquette, Creighton, St. John's, of course. And I think that's just going to bring in so much more attention and great basketball into the Big East if he does choose to go to Providence. So that's definitely something that I think could be pretty cool if he does end up transferring there. But I definitely think of those four, Arkansas is by far the best fit for him. I know on the Saturdays and Stories podcast, they did talk a little bit about how I felt if Alex Caravan doesn't come back next year, then maybe Chad Baker-Mazara is a guy Hurley and his staff tries to target or go after to replace Caravan. The more I think about it, still behind my thoughts, I think that would be someone that's worth looking at. But I mean, I just really don't think that is something that will end up happening. I mean, I just don't think UConn has any interest in him. And that's okay because Hurley and his staff know a lot better than I do. But again, I think that's probably going to take care of everything I have about both PJ Haggerty and Chad Baker-Mazara. Really unique and interesting situations that is going on with how their NIL demands are kind of going and just how things transpire at their old schools. It is unfortunate that I don't think that PJ Haggerty necessarily had a problem with either Penny Hardaway nor the school itself. I just don't think Memphis has the NIL budget to be able to keep PJ Haggerty and what he wants. I think Memphis just doesn't have the money that a lot of people would assume that they have, even with Penny Hardaway as their coach. And it is unfortunate to see teams not be able to retain some of their star players like we're seeing with PJ Haggerty in Memphis. But again, I think this is probably going to take care of everything I have for this episode today, talking about these two players and just the situations which are kind of going on with them. Again, really interesting to see how these are going to continue to unfold. Definitely going to monitor them, and who knows, maybe me and Josh will make a video reacting to where these guys end up landing once it's all said and done. But until then, we will see you all next time.